Hello. Today we're going to be looking at Enterprise Systems. That's Chapter 11. We should be able to do this one in one video. So let's get started. The first thing we should take a look at are our learning outcomes for today. We are really going to be diving into the process of getting a product from a raw material to the plate or to the end consumer, and we're going to be doing that from a supply chain management perspective. Now, we're not going to talk as much about the people process, but look specifically at these different management systems. Enterprise systems is what we're calling them, and they can be customer relationship management systems, knowledge management systems, resource planning systems, the whole kit and caboodle. And there's a lot of different subsystems and kind of terminology we're going to hit along the way. So let's take a quick look at an enterprise system. And I'm going to be switching back and forth between the PowerPoint and an internet browser to kind of give you visuals of what we are discussing. So the first thing that comes to mind when we think of an enterprise system is this. This is exactly what we're talking about. All right, this is not what we're talking about at all. You know, this is the enterprise. This is what people hear when they hear the word enterprise. And it is a large endeavor, but we're not talking about anything like this. So there is your joke of the video. There will be more bad jokes to come. Let's jump back into the PowerPoint and see what we're really discussing here. When we say enterprise system, we are talking about an application that supports all the different business functions and decision making throughout an organization. Now, we talked about business intelligence and we've talked about business data. In an enterprise system, what it is going to do, it is going to bridge the gap between that business data and getting business intelligence. And so we can make good, intelligent decisions. Now, where would we need to make these decisions in our business functions? The obvious choice is in the supply chain. And the supply chain is, in essence, all of the different steps in moving a product from not existing into the hands of the consumer. That is the supply chain. Now, to visualize this, think of each individual step as a link. And when you put those links together, that creates a chain, okay? And that's how we get goods from raw materials to customers. It would probably help to see a visualization of this. And here's one right here. We see the raw material here, which apparently is oil. Oil is then taken to a supplier to be processed. Then it is turned into a good, not really a finished good, but a good that goes to the next step, which is the manufacturer. The manufacturer then processes it more to make a finished good, which goes to be distributed. And this is where we would start saying where the logistics come in. When we start thinking about trucks, trains, and airplanes, we're talking about logistics. And really, this truck, there's also a truck here between raw materials and suppliers. There's also a truck here between suppliers and manufacturers. And then, of course, distribution between the manufacturer and the retailer. And then Black Friday comes after you've had a whole lot of turkey, and the retailer moves their product to the consumer. And in this web economy, there's probably a delivery truck here as well, not necessarily you going to the retailer, but maybe you making an Amazon.Prime purchase or whatever. All right. So now we see that we've got a supply chain, and now we need systems to manage these different steps. Now, you know, of course, you could have a very big system that manages this whole thing from kit to caboodle, and that is called a supply chain management system. Now, this requires a lot of collaboration. It's the process of working with a supplier and a partner to develop procedures for delivering products. Now, when we have things like this, these are built around international standards, and we call it proprietary information. We'll see it later, where all the manufacturers have agreed to make a certain widget to this particular specification. And what does it do? It helps these things move more quickly. It makes procuring materials quicker. It makes transforming materials into intermediate finished goods. And an intermediate good is what we just talked about before. When a raw material gets to a process to a certain point where it can then be sold as an input to another product, that's kind of an intermediately finished good. Okay. And then finally, distributing the finished products on to the end consumer. We saw how that looks. Now, the communication here happens in a lot of different realms. There's the product flow. This is moving the physical good, intermediate good, and finished good around the system. There's an information flow, and this is where the computer systems or the enterprise systems can very help quite a bit. And then the finance flow is also another opportunity for information systems to really get in there and create some enterprise level business intelligence. And what we're seeing is that when these systems take this into place, you can make some key decisions on where to move goods. That's what location is. This is the where. The inventory. How much do you need based on what you know about how the good is selling? The production, how much do you need to produce? And then transportation, how do you want to get it from point A to point B? And having this data is a okay step, but having that data in a system that can make some assumptions and bring some insights to the forefront really helps make those key decisions. And that's why supply chain management is such a large portion of kind of our consumer behavior, even if we don't necessarily know it's there. So next we want to look at how to exchange this data electronically. And we call that EDI, and it's an electronic data exchange. Now what this does is this allows large organizations, sometimes small, medium-sized organizations, to all collaborate in one kind of computer paradigm. And if they can all agree to certain standards, like we mentioned, and a lot of these are proprietary, which means they are owned by one particular person, they can begin to realize some synergies or some efficiencies. If all of our data goes into the system this one way, it's very easy to search it back out. And the ease of that, shows up in making deliveries more accurate. It also shows up as being platform independent, because if it's web based, it can live on the internet. So any partner can jump in at any point to to understand where the product's at in the supply chain, what needs to happen for the next step to move forward. And this makes a lot of the coordination a lot easier. Now, like anything, it's not perfect. There are drawbacks. The standards are proprietary. In small networks, if it is let's take something like silverware or cutlery. There's probably someone who produces ore, someone who refines that ore down to metal. And the next step would be people who turn that raw metal into cutlery. And then that last step would be the retailer that sells that cutlery. So along those 4 steps, if those are the only 4 players in this EDI system, that can be very expensive to develop this system just for those 4 players. And some organizations can use the internet or open standards to do this, but it can be expensive. Now, what we have seen with EDI is that there have been small organizations pop up in this market to fill this need. Here's a good example of a company, and this is an IT company, that has sprung up to fill the need of EDI. So, you come to their website, it's a business-to-business exchange site. You can sign up to kind of get a quote. And what they do is they're going to take the expensive development, if you were to build your own system, and turn it into a web-based solution that you can either install on your own hardware or you can host it in the cloud. And we've talked about the cloud before. So this is a good example where there has been a opening in the market where someone could find a place to handle this type of transaction between different members of a supply chain, and they could all opt in at a greatly reduced price versus building their own system from scratch. So those are some of the drawbacks. We just looked at how if we were to internet enable this, it could make life a little bit easier. But there are other portions of a um, supply chain management paradigm. Excuse me, there, having a hard time with English. That we can also internet enable. And some of the different activities that we can use the internet to make more efficient are purchasing and procurement, inventory management, transportation, order processing, customer service, production scheduling, and there are more. Any portion of the supply chain, if we were to put it under detailed scrutiny, we would be able to find a way to possibly use the internet to make it more efficient when we have to collaborate. Now, I think we're all familiar with the internet as an exchange or marketplace. Even I think one of the chapters we looked at before talked about e-commerce. Well, there's certainly a role of e-commerce inside of supply chain management and enterprise systems. Now, we're looking specifically at an e-marketplace here, and we'll kind of demarcate this from an e-distribution system in a second. But an e-marketplace allows buyers and sellers, and when we say buyers and sellers, really we mean suppliers and purchasers to come together in a single platform to look at competitive prices, to make sure that that delivery timetables can be met, and so forth. And what does this do? Well, of course, it gives opportunities. It's on a single platform, but it also solves constraint problems for international trade. With an e-marketplace, we can actually see what is being offered in countries outside of our own, or outside of the places that have a traditional, long lived relationship for this type of good. Right now, a lot of manufacturing for American products happens in China, but with an e-marketplace, that would allow other countries that want to be competitive in this type of exporting to get into the game when they may not have been able to when the marketplace was through a network of individuals, not necessarily an online platform. It makes it easy to compare prices. We talked about that, and reduces marketing cost. And an example of this is Alibaba. Now, you've probably heard of this site before. They just went public a couple months ago and turned the millionaire owners into gazillionaires, or billionaires, of course. But what Alibaba does is it allows you to look for something that you want to produce and then quickly see who makes it. So let's just take a look at blue jeans for men. So you can see here, these are wholesale jeans for men. And right now, this isn't geared towards an individual. Most individuals are not going to buy a minimum of 300 pieces, not going to buy 300 pair of pants. But as a, as a manufacturer of blue jeans, and not really a manufacturer because the manufacturing is happening on their end, as someone who takes this intermediate product, which is a blue jean, and then turns it into a brand product, you can see that I can get, between $8 to $15, I can get this price down. So at 300 pieces, and we can go in here and do a little work. At 300 pieces, the price per piece is about $15. But if we were to take this up to 15,000 pieces, well, this price may come down quite a bit. And the other thing I can see where this is coming from, this is in Shenzhen, which is in China, like we talked about before. I can contact this supplier and learn a little bit more about their supply methods. And I can actually look at these jeans and dig in a little bit to understand what the product offering is, uh, what their company is about, and even a brief overview of their experience. So you can see here, this is an example of an e-marketplace that allows me to do a lot of stuff with overseas and international suppliers that I could not have done before. And I'm doing this just from my office. Imagine if I needed to put together an order of 20, 1,500 outfits for a marching band, or I'm running my own kind of screen printing, clothing customization shop, And instead of buying everything retail and then marking it up even more, then I could buy it wholesale from someplace like this, get it shipped in, and then be able to quickly and in a inexpensive fashion provide this to the next person down the supply chain. So you can see how these e-marketplaces really benefit organizations. The next thing we want to look at are e-distributors. Now, the difference between an e-distributor and an e-marketplace is that an e-distributor is really going to focus on getting the finished product to the consumer. So, this makes it a lot more efficient for manufacturers to get their product out there without necessarily having to set up brick and mortar shops. And they can offer some efficiencies like fast delivery, wide selection of products, the whole kit and caboodle. One that comes to mind immediately is Amazon. And this is a good example of an e-distributor. We can take a product like, I don't know, a power drill, since it had drills up at the top. And we can see here that we have power drills across the entire spectrum of manufacturers. We've got some Black & Decker here. There's a DeWalt drill. I don't know how many power drill companies are out there. There's Genesis. I think we probably saw Craftsman somewhere up here, depending on what you prefer. But this is a good example of an e-distributor. These folks are not really building out intermediate products. These are finished goods. But what this allows you to do is you can go to one place to look at finished goods from a variety of manufacturers and companies. And it also provides an efficiency for these manufacturing folks, so they don't have to build out brick and mortar shops or build out their own websites, even though most of them have. You can buy it in one place, and the consumer can have a more succinct interface to interact with. Now, this is also the case for online auctions and reverse auctions. Reverse auctions where people are supposed to bid, well, sellers bid for products and services. I'm going to let you look into this a little bit. I feel like this is pretty straightforward, but if you're new to online auctions, I do want you to look at the book, okay? And then the next piece to this is called a collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment system. Now, this is typically coordinating members all the way through the point of sale, which means that the supplier, the manufacturer, the retailer, all are getting together to make sure that everything at the point of sale is what it needs to be. What this looks like is that we're talking about logistics. This means that Walmart is working with its supplier and the supplier of its supplier. So, in essence, we've got an organization that is pretty much all working together from the start of that supply chain all the way to the end. This is really built out. So this means our retailer Walmart here knows who their manufacturer is. They've worked with their manufacturer to get a good deal from the supplier. The three of these have worked together to make sure that the raw materials are sourced as cheaply as possible. And all the distribution, all the logistics in between each one of these is probably built in with one company to make sure it ensures that these timetables are completely kept. This almost always looks like in modern business as a just-in-time model, where what we're seeing is that the inventory, the sales data are shared with everyone, and a lot of this stuff is automated. As soon as stock gets low, it's sent out. This is a very intimidating diagram here. We will try to break it out a little bit here. We really have 4 zones. We've got strategy and planning. This is making rules. That's what strategy and planning is. Demand and supply management. This is where we know the rules on how we want to operate. We can then do analysis to see where we're fitting within the rules in terms of our demand and supply management. Execution, any place that we are off optimum. So if our if our supply is lower than our expected need, we order more stuff. If we're not building as much stuff. If production is not where we need it to be, we build more stuff or we buy more stuff. And then finally, analysis. This is where we take a look at these other three things we've done and start readjusting our, we start monitoring our execution, monitoring our performance, see what our consumers are saying, and then we adapt the rules to what we've learned. So this is this loop. Don't be afraid of this diagram. It is certainly frightening, but what it's saying in essence is that we are going to put together a strategy. We're then going to use that to build out the different levels of that supply chain, and then we're going to execute our strategy, as you know, and then we're going to take a look at it. We're going to evaluate it and make changes. So, I've seen this loop called a lot of different things. There's another one that kind of adds these two together, which is called build, measure, learn. And in essence, what it says is that whenever we do something, we pay attention to it all the way to the end of the loop, and then we readjust what we're doing. Okay? You're going to have to read the book on this. Of course, the language that they're using in the book is different than what I'm using, but this process, collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment, is very big. It is, and not big as in the length of the process, but it is very well adopted by most all large retailers and manufacturing companies. So if you're going to be using this knowledge to go into the business world, this is inescapable in some respects. Okay? Let's take a look at CRM, which is Customer Relationship Management. And what this does is this is where you use software to organize your contacts and relationships. Okay? It lets you improve the services you're having with customers. It lets you target customers specifically for marketing. It lets you build out long-term relationships. And the way it lets you do that is you can identify customer segments. And the reason you can identify customer segments is because you've been collecting data on the customers. And these segments will let you better meet the customer's needs. They'll let you better retain customers by making the right move when it's appropriate. And it also lets you understand which customers are profitable and loyal and which ones are not. There are a lot of different software packages that let you manage customer relationship. The activities that they let you manage are sales automation, order processing, automating marketing, customer serve, knowledge, customer support, not customer surfing, knowledge management, and personalization technology. Okay. And to look a little bit deeper, what we see, these are normally implemented as kind of web-based CRM systems. Now, there are some that are on-premise, which means you can only access them from within a particular company. But with this mobile world, most of the folks are doing something that is web-based, and you can see all these different web-based ones. There's a couple ones that are really big. Optima's pretty big. Oracle PeopleSoft is pretty big. And the one that most everyone uses is Salesforce. And to give you a look at that, here's Salesforce. And this is a pretty big player in the market. I think Salesforce is even presented at Apple events when they've released new versions of phones or whatnot. And what Salesforce is going to do is it is going to help you from the beginning to the end, even using different social media networks, to really understand how you're interacting with your customers, to know what things they can do to help. They even have services like helping you do successful planning, training, getting certified in Salesforce, because this is the world's #1 platform to let you know how to build up an infrastructure of clients. So if we're looking at this stuff, the theme here is that we are needing to build a technology that meets these different supply chain management needs, supply chain management. So let's move a little bit further and look at personalization technology. And this is where we are personalizing different systems to meet specific customers, and whether it be customer relationships or increasing profits. And what this is it's not just a standard out-of-the-box piece of software, but your software changes based on what you've done with it. And Salesforce is another good example of this. When you log into Salesforce, you don't get a standard Salesforce screen. You can customize it to show dashboards and data points that are most important to you and your organization. Now, there's a little bit more about personalization technology, but I'm going to let you look that up on your own. And the same thing with collaborative filtering, which is where you're looking for different items within kind of an information system to make sure that you're seeing the stuff that matters most to you. I want you to look that up on your own. Again, the text does a really good job of describing those. We're going to jump ahead into knowledge management. Now, knowledge management is very important. We manage knowledge in many different ways. One way we manage knowledge is by training staff and having staff train other staff. That's one people way to manage knowledge. Something else that people do to manage knowledge is they keep their emails forever in hopes that if they need to remember something, they can search through their email and regain that knowledge if forgotten. I'm someone who does that. But there are also systems out there that allow you to create, store, and easily retrieve knowledge. Now, what is the value of this? If you think about what Wikipedia did to revolutionize how we share knowledge as a society, just having one repository where anyone can add or anyone can remove new knowledge and update knowledge for its accuracy has made it where people nowadays treat the internet as their knowledge store. Okay. Now, with the broader internet, you can really find definitions of things. You can find articles that people have written. You can even find a lot of pop culture and stuff there. But organizations have a lot of business intelligence knowledge that they have created over their time in existence. And you don't want to lose it. If you have a sales manager who has discovered there is a great way to close the sale in the agribusiness market that involves making references to particular droughts or past events within a certain climate or within a certain geographical area, now that knowledge is just stored in the mind of that sales manager. But if you can move it out of their mind into a broader system, kind of a culture of sharing within this organization, you can really begin to get some efficiencies. So, what are some obstacles to sharing knowledge? Well, some of the obstacles are no one knows where to put it. If you want to share something for future generations now, what do? You get a time capsule, bury it in the backyard. You hope someone finds it later. Or you tell a little kid, in my case, my children, I would tell them something I want them to retain and share on later, hoping that they won't forget it. Well, when we have a knowledge management system, we don't have that obstacle. We have a place within the organization where knowledge goes. And then what we want to do is then give some rules or some guidelines on how to identify what knowledge to store, how to store it, and then how to share these facts with people whom could benefit from it. And we call this kind of a knowledge repository, where we store the knowledge of experts, and it's created for employees to refer to when they need it. And some people call this middleware, some call it groupware. They're different tools, database management systems, you name it. Now, how does this contribute to the larger organization? It promotes innovation because if someone has a good idea, they can quickly research to see if it's been attempted, how that attempt went, and what the learning outcomes were from it. It improves customer service. If we think about Salesforce, which is relationship management, as we gain knowledge of individual customers, we can use that knowledge of them when interacting with them in the future. But we can also take the insights from all of the different customers, all of the different issues, and then put that together in a knowledge system to help us create efficiencies in dealing with that. In the same way we can aggregate that knowledge from customers, we can also do it with delivery time or with our employees. So it's the first step is writing it down, which is, I'm hoping you take notes, you're writing it down. But the second step is putting together a system, a knowledge management system, where you can retrieve that information however you want. With the class, specifically what you need to do is figure out a way to retrieve this stuff from your memory to recall it when you need it for the test. And that's, in essence, if we apply that same process to a business system, the system, the knowledge management system, is what they use to recall that information. And the test is the business intelligence decisions they have to make. I mean, the true test of a company is if it survives quarter over quarter. And the way they take that test is by making the correct decisions or good decisions as they go along. Now, with everything else, there's a system to manage this, and we'll take a look at one. This organization called Safe Harbor is a knowledge base system. Now a lot of knowledge base systems are going to be specific to the organization, but here is one that is kind of web based for small companies. It allows you to create articles or to create knowledge, in essence, written knowledge. It allows you to search it. You can create the articles quickly, and then unlimited portals, so you can make as many different ways to access it as you like. They have a lot of different templates, so you can build this system to be whatever you want. Here's an example of someone, True Pangin University. So we can assume the company is called True Pangin. They do dog walking or whatever. But then they can train their new employees through a university style type interface. It allows you to have forums where people can respond to one another. And then the last thing is it allows you to kind of test your beliefs with different activities to see what people prefer over another. And that's A/B testing, I think, is what they're referring to here. Yeah, that actually is what they're talking about. That's more of a marketing thing, but that's a pretty nice feature for knowledge management. And then finally, they provide you some support. So if you have issues, you can use it. Now, this is a really well built out knowledge support system. And this is something you should be thinking about as you move into organizations in the future. Some will have these type of systems, some will not. And the question is, who will make that determination on whether or not one is needed? Switching gears a little bit, we see that there's these big systems, but as you probably know, as you begin to grow systems, you have to have someone who is accountable for those systems. And in this case, we would be talking about a Chief Knowledge Officer, CKO. And it seems to be a 3-letter acronym, Chief Blank Officer for every business function. Why not have one for knowledge? Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here. I think you can assume the responsibilities of the Chief Knowledge Officer are related to knowledge, understanding the importance of it, how to manage it, and putting together a system, making sure that the knowledge is actually being retained and transferred, making sure that knowledge resources are properly collected, disseminated, and making sure that organizations profits from these knowledge resources. And what that really means is what we've talked about time and time again in this course, which is return on investment. And with any and everything that we're looking at, we are pretty much saying that we need to make sure that the time and money we spend on it, that the return is better than what we spent. For example, with this course, the amount of time you spend on the course is directly related to kind of the return you get out of it, which is in a short-sighted fashion, your letter grade. In a long-term fashion, whether or not you have to look up the term CRM when you get into the business world, or whether or not you can remember it because of the learning that took place in this course. And that's really what we should be looking for, is hoping that your return on investment in your mind extends past just getting an A, but actually retaining this knowledge to serve you when you're in these situations in the future. We're going to take a look at another system here called an ERP, and this is a resource planning system. So when we're thinking about resources, what are resources? Well, resources in this sense are pretty much any activity, that one can take or any tangible thing that one can touch. So, what does that look like? We need a resource is how we purchase products. Purchasing is a resource. Okay. Manufacturing, that's something we can touch. That's a resource. Human resources, well, it's embedded in the name. That is a resource. E-commerce, that's a resource because that's an activity we can kind of go into. Now, an ERP is one system to control them all. If you're a Lord of the Rings fan, here it is. So, here are, I guess it's instead of 9, the 10 rings of whatever, and the one in the middle kind of controls all of these, this unified database. Now, what this looks like is that when we looked at that big diagram before that we saw from the CPFR, from that process, we saw that we had these different rings of activity, and in here we can see planning, that's an activity. Forecasting, that's an activity. Buying is an activity. Production, that's an activity. Well, this manages the activities, if you will, strategy, analysis, execution, and demand. But the system we're talking about, this ERP, is going to manage those activities, but it's also going to take a look at the physicality of the inventory, the physicality of the manufacturing, the actual trucks and what's going on with those. The accounting, the customer relationship, all this stuff is still going to be there, but it's going to take a deeper look. Now, this next slide are some of the components. I'm not going to read it to you. I'll put it up for a couple seconds. If if you're having a hard time understanding what we mean by this, and that's the royal we, me, or the author, take a look at this slide. Pause it, understand it. This is also table 11.1 in your book. Review the book and make sure that you feel comfortable with what you're seeing. Okay? Some benefits of a well-designed system are it increases the availability of information. Data is accurate, so you can respond to it quicker. And then satisfaction across the supply chain goes up. Customers are more satisfied when their product gets to them quicker. Employees are more satisfied when they can sell or do these different activities without delay. Planning and scheduling is more accurate. Your supplier and you can have a better relationship because you understand what's happening in each other's world, and information is more reliable. And a good system is going to reduce the cost of inventory, labor, and the time to get things done. And the reason that works is that if you know how much you need to order, you won't have extra on hand because you have to pay to store inventory. Labor is very simple. If you have real work for people to do while they're working, then you don't have to have them work as much. That's how you save money on labor. And then finally, order fulfillment time. Again, that's logistics. If everything is a well-synchronized process, things are going to go smoothly. And I think about synchronized swimmer or a good dance routine. And during a good dance routine, everybody is doing exactly what they should be doing. And then they can get to the end point in the desired amount of time, as long as no one makes mistakes and they don't have to start over. So what are the drawbacks? Anything that's great and wonderful, of course, is going to be expensive, so it has high cost. It requires a lot of installation that contributes to the cost. It takes a lot of training that contributes to the cost. And sometimes it's incompatible with old systems. So, what we're talking about here is those resources we're managing. We have to manage them at a higher level to get this system to work. Now, some are available as modules, so people can only purchase what they need, and that can keep the cost down a little bit. And we have an example of that. Here is an example of an ERP system made to build on individuals' EDI systems. So this company will help you get your processes, your administration, everything into their system. Here's some companies they worked with. And, if we visit their website, we can see that they've done this for some different companies here. They use Microsoft Dynamics, QuickBooks, so they can be a solution if you're in need of ERP. Now, what does this mean? It's definitely going to be an expensive solution. It may be cheaper than others, but there's going to take a lot of upfront time, expenditure, equipment to get this thing going. But here's a good example of a cloud-based ERP system. All right. So let's end on this. Here are the terms we've covered and that you need to understand. We didn't talk about collaborative filtering. I talked about it kind of as something, I referred to it as something you should look at. So you need to understand that. CPFR, CRM, EDI, ERP, we talked about those at length. We talked about kind of the e-marketplace and the e-distributors, and we talked about personal customization. So that's what we've covered. If you're unclear on these, go back and take a look at it again in the lecture or read it in the book. And I encourage you to read the book because the lecture is just a brief overview to help solidify what you've learned from the reading. Some of the key terms we took a look at: enterprise, knowledge management. We didn't really discuss online auctions. We did talk about personalization. We briefly talked about a reverse auction. I think we spent maybe 20 or 30 seconds on that. And we really covered supply chain and supply chain management. And as you go forward with a business degree at this university, supply chains is something that you will see over and over again. So take the time now, if you are not comfortable with this concept, to become comfortable with this concept so you can actually achieve so you can actually get a personal ROI on this knowledge. And then a little bit of a summary. Supply chains exist for service manufacturing organizations. CRMs help us organize data and make better use to understand customers. And ERP bring all these things together to make sure we can understand the business that we're working in and to get efficiencies and a return on investment. And that wraps up this lecture. The quiz will be up on Monday. It's going to be worth 20 points, but understand this stuff and get a return on investment for your education dollar.